The Sound of Podcast. The show about podcast and broadcast. Starts now.
What you're listening to is this week's Sounding Off newsletter. If you're not subscribed to that yet, you are making a big mistake in your life, and you need to get that fixed immediately. You can sign up in the show notes of this episode. I don't spend a lot of time on New Year's resolutions and setting goals for the year ahead. But other people started to publish theirs, and then I decided to look at them, and there's a few good ones out there, so I adopt the best ones. It's kind of like wandering the aisles and shopping at Safeway. What I do have, though, is some advice for 2025 for podcasters and broadcasters. And as I write this, I'm looking across the winter desert called Manitoba and seeing the absolute best of what January has to offer. There's three distinct colors in front of me. There's the winter white, the dull brown of the trees, and the light blue of the sky. Current temperature is minus 23 Celsius. That's below 0 Fahrenheit. Thankfully, it's a nice day, beautiful blue, and we're not engulfed in cloudy gray. And this is kind of where I feel radio is right now. It offers some bright spots on good days, but largely it's beholden to the cold and frigidness of the season. Unfortunately, and this is the bad news, there is no spring on the way for radio. If radio wants to change, it's going to need warmer temperatures, and it's going to have to manufacture those themselves. It's really easy for me to sit on a podcast and point out all of radio's flaws and what it needs to do. I think that era is over. Radio has what it has now, and good luck is all I can really offer. We all know what the problems are. The people who own most of the radio stations in North America are not champions of the product. They have no interest in the medium's success and are more concerned about seeing it supplement other aspects of their business, say like iPhone sales, cable TV subscriptions, or engagement with their app. However, there are some people who are really invested in the radio space, and I love their passion for the business. We know who these people are. We've sent out the invites, and we want to have you on the show this year to talk about your success stories, what works and what doesn't work. Check your inbox. You might already have the invite there. Now, specifically to Canada, I would love to see the CRTC ask a group of 12 smart audio minds to get together to consult them on the best ways radio's power can be maximized for Canadians. And when we mean maximized for Canadians, we mean the radio listener, not record companies, not lobby groups, not SOCAN, nothing to do with music. We're looking for the advocates for radio listeners who really don't have a voice. And then I woke up from that dream. Anyhow, we should be very wary about what the CRTC is considering for Canadian radio, because what they have now should be good enough to finish radio off completely in Canada. Now you know why I titled this episode Best of Luck to All Involved. Now let's talk about podcasting for a sec. My sister has sent me a picture from her home in Costa Rica. I can see a beautiful sunset, almond trees, palms, a pool, the ocean. Lots of opportunity, hope, and color. The picture looks like podcasting. At one point, there was a clean canvas, and what was finished in the end was a beautiful product. But I do have a message for podcasting in 2025, and that's beware. Beware of your brand. Be cognizant of your audience. Understand that you don't have to do everything that every podcast wizard tells you to do. There's plenty of time to make changes and adjust. I think the best example of doing this is video for your podcast. So back in 2023, there was this push towards video, which was born out of Google shutting down their app and then sort of asking podcasters to transition their show to YouTube, where if you use their tool, your show could be reformatted into a video where it would not accommodate things like, updating your podcast audio, your podcast ads. Those wouldn't make it in at all. And your show wasn't going to be downloaded. It was going to be like video stream, so it's not going to count in your podcast stats. Now listen, a lot of people like to watch their podcasts on YouTube. That's totally fine. You can be a part of it. But I think one of the most disturbing trends throughout all this are the number of podcasters who started to promote their show on YouTube. They were essentially asking their listeners to watch the show rather than listen to it, which when you think about it is really the easiest way to consume it, through your ears. Okay, great. The show's on YouTube. But here I am, and I wish I had a shirt that says, I'm only here for the search. I love the search on YouTube and Google. But really, that's all I'm interested in for my podcast. So if you're interested in seeing a largely unedited version of me talking with this week's podcast guest, that's available. You can see that video on YouTube, Facebook. I also upload it to X, and it also appears on Twitch. But it's really just there to serve as a reminder that there's a really kick-ass audio experience waiting for you on the podcast app of your choice. Most of you listen to this show on Apple Podcasts, and the number 2 app is Spotify. So let's talk about Spotify for a second. Spotify has decided to get into video and encourage podcasters to upload their video to the platform. And the same sort of thing happens as it does for YouTube. You lose your dynamic podcast ads, if you have any. The stats are Spotify stats and no longer count as downloads with your podcast host. Oh, and wait a second. Who watches video on Spotify? No, seriously, do you know anybody who watches video on Spotify? Yeah, you can expect those sort of results. Let's think about why your listener went to Spotify in the first place. They likely love the combination of music and podcasts together on one app. And again, we are going to have podcasters who are going to want to monetize their video on Spotify. But have you read what it takes to get money from them? So I can sign up today and instantly become a Spotify partner and monetize. But to qualify for Spotify monetization, my videos need to be hosted and uploaded through Spotify for Creators, or Megaphone, have 10,000 streamed hours on Spotify in the last 30 days, have been streamed by 2,000 unique Spotify users in the last 30 days, and have at least 12 episodes published. Okay, that's a lot. So I consider the Sound Off podcast to be a successful podcast. It pays for itself in many ways. People can watch it or they can listen to it. But if I wanted to qualify for Spotify monetization on video, I would have to ask you, the Spotify listener, I would have to ask those of you listening on Spotify to stream the video, which is a lower listening experience. And even if every Spotify user I have did that, I would only come in at 7,620 hours, which is 3/4 the way to qualifying for monetization. In contrast, YouTube is getting nearly 4,000 hours a month from my videos. And remember, the YouTube audience, they're actually choosing to watch the show. Or perhaps they just stumbled upon it. I don't really care. All this to say, beware. Beware of platforms coming to undermine the good you have created between you and your audience. You need to find ways to have Spotify work for you, to have YouTube work for you. These are platforms that want to take your content and monetize it for themselves. But you need to remember that you only have to participate in the parts of the platforms that work for you. Yes, be on YouTube for the search. If you can monetize, that's great. Be on Spotify, but don't jump over a $20 bill to get to a $5. If being on Spotify with video means a lot to you, then upload to an alternate video feed and keep the audio feed pristine and sounding good. Right now, I just know that you are likely listening to the show through headphones, and making a great audio listening experience is what keeps you coming back. So that's my pep talk for broadcasters and podcasters in 2025. Guests return next week. Thanks so much for listening through until the end. And if you're using the Spotify app to listen, you can leave a comment. If you're watching the silly bouncy video on YouTube, leave a comment. If you're using Apple, leave a 5-star review. If you write something funny enough, I'll even mention it in the future. And if you're using a Podcast 2.0 app like Fountain, send me some Satoshis.
The Sound Off Podcast is written and hosted by Matt Cundill. Produced by Evan Serminski. Edited by Taylor McLean. Social media by Aidan Glassy. Another great creation from the Sound Off Media Company. There's always more at soundoffpodcast.com.